John Verity, easy boy, easy. Oh, that was amazing. Thank you so much for choosing that track, John. It was great. What do you remember about recording that?
Well, I wrote it as an opener. I mean, when you hear the arrangement, it starts with that bass line, and then the drums come in, and then the guitar comes in. I wrote it as a live track that would be a great opener to the set. So it was that's what it was all about. And I think that we actually did it on quite a lot of TV shows, up and down music shows around, well, all over the place, really. And I think because it programmed well as well, because of the way that everything entered one after the other, yeah, and it was good live. It works really well live. We toured with Aerosmith of all bands, in the Europe and Scandinavia. I'm not sure if we did any gigs in the UK. I can't remember now, but Phoenix didn't really take off over here because our timing was pretty bad. We put out the first album when punk was first happening in 1976, so it clashed a bit. Clashed a bit.
Excuse the pun, yes.
So yeah, totally unintentional, but yeah. So our market was everywhere but the UK, and we did a second album, but by then I was getting into doing a lot more, because I produced Phoenix in the studio, and I'd already started to work with other people. I produced Saxon's first album, and then I got involved in a studio in London as a partner, and decided that I would focus on record production for a while. So that's what I did, and I did quite diverse stuff, really. I mean, I did stuff as heavy as Motorhead. I produced a Motorhead album, and as light as the Searchers. I produced some Searchers stuff. So, I mean, I did quite a broad spectrum of productions over the years. I produced Brian Connolly from Sweet. So I enjoyed it, but I missed playing live. I mean, if you think about it, that's how I started, isn't it? I mean, I just really, really miss playing live. So I recorded in the early 80s. I recorded what was kind of my comeback album called Interrupted Journey, and that was my excuse to get back out on the road again. And I've been on the road ever since.
You can't beat it. You can't get the buzz in a studio, can you? What you get from an audience. Understand that. Totally understand that. Oh, talking about production.
Well,
you did miss one person out. I mean, it's a little band you may not have heard of before out there in pop. A band called the Beatles. Beatles. They probably need a bit of promoting because they've never been heard of. A guy called Ringo Starr. Never heard of him myself. You've actually produced one of his albums as well, did you?
No, I didn't produce that. I played on it. What happened there was Russ Ballard. Yeah, well, Russ Ballard, who I replaced in Argent, I ended up doing. He rang me up out of the blue one time and said, "I'm working in the studio at the moment, and the engineer has gone into hospital, and I've heard that you're good behind the desk. Would you mind coming and working with me?" So I worked with Russell for quite a long time in the studio, recording his demos, because he was, I mean, I don't know if anybody out there is familiar with Russ Ballard's songs, but I mean, his songs get covered by all sorts of people. He wrote "So You Win Again" for Hot Chocolate. He wrote "Since You've Been Gone" for Rainbow. I mean, we demoed some major hits in that period. And then Ringo Starr approached Russell to ask him to produce an album, and said, "You can bring whatever musicians you want along." So Russ said, "Will you come and play guitar on this album I've got to go and do in Copenhagen?" And I said, "Yeah, what is it?" And he said, "Ringo Starr." And of course, I said, "Nah, I didn't."
Oh my goodness, no. Jeez, well, it doesn't really get much bigger than that, does it? You know, maybe McCartney, maybe
Not
just about
really.
trumps him, but you know, blimey, that's what an amazing life you've had. I'm very, very jealous. Look, just one other thing quickly before we go to the next record. I understand it. You've obviously we've talked about the support slot with Jimi Hendrix, but there was another guy that you guested with, who is one of my all-time heroes, the Irish guitarist singer Rory Gallagher. Tell us a bit about that, will you?
Right, that was the I think Fender decided to do a concert, which was I think it was the 40th anniversary of the Fender Stratocaster.
Oh yeah.
And they wanted to put on a show with a load of Strat players, and I was invited to it. And of course, a lot of other Fender Strat players were there, and Rory was there. Hank was supposed to do it, but actually didn't turn up.
Okay.
Well, he didn't not turn up. The people behind, the promoters behind it, hadn't told everybody that the gig, and quite, I don't blame them for doing what they did. But the gig was being filmed, but they didn't tell any of us when they asked us to do it. And so certain acts got the hump and said, we're not doing it if it's going to be filmed, because we haven't come up with an arrangement, financial arrangement.
Okay.
And Hank was one of the ones who said, okay, I'm not playing this game, so he didn't come. But Rory did, and we spent a bit of time in the bar afterwards, like you do. And he was on good form. He was, he's a lovely bloke. And there were lots of other interesting people on it. Well, you'll know about Strat players. There was lots of well-known Strat players there, and it was just a gig. I think it was at Manchester Free Trade Hall, if I remember rightly.
Well, look, before you mention who else was there, I'm going to have to put some Rory on now. You've got it in my head, okay? I'm going to go over to some Rory Gallagher, and we'll be back after this track.